We're out about 3 admissions to museums,
gentlemen,
that's about all.
ladies? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the May 9th Selectmen's meeting. We are reconvening after executive session. I'll start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd ask Diane to allow us to lead us in the pledge.
Sure.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. For those of you who may not recall, generally the meeting after the election is a reorganization meeting, but in a previous decision, this board has decided to do the reorganization after the annual town meeting. That provides continuity for the chairman of the Board of Selectmen who helped was the chairman during the budget sessions to remain as chairman and represent the board at town meeting in that position. So we will now, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes of April 16th.
So
first.
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Thank you. And I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes of April 22nd.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstained? Thank you very much. This time we offer the opportunity for new public business, that is, any business that's not on the agenda the public would like to bring to our attention. Is there anything that would like to be brought to our attention? Sir, you're more than welcome. We always like your comments. All right. All right, save it up. All right, the next agenda item, a public hearing will be held on the application of Texas Roadhouse Holdings, LLC, doing business as Texas Roadhouse, 301 Newbury Street, John C. Morosco, manager, for a change of officers, director, LLC managers at the corporate level. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Andrew Upton for the licensee. This is what the ABCC calls an inverted master file for a change of officers. We've already filed this for all 11 Texas Roadhouses in Massachusetts. It's already been approved. What they are doing is changing some officers at the headquarters. There is no impact on any aspect of the operation on Texas Roadhouse in Danvers or in any Texas Roadhouse in Massachusetts. Just some officers changing at the corporate headquarters.
Okay, were there any questions? I'll start with you, Selectman Bennett.
No, I just want to comment that picture's appropriate for Texas Roadhouse being here
There
before
you
us.
go.
I personally am moving towards a plant-based diet, but I think you make a good point.
Selectman
No
Clark.
questions.
No questions, thank you.
Selectman Mills? Selectman Limas?
No, but I appreciate you explaining it. I was wondering why there was such a backdoor. I have never seen it come in this way, that you go to the ABCC first, so I appreciate you explaining that.
They have a rule, if you have 10 or more locations, you can do it this way, but if you have fewer, you have to do it the other way.
Okay. And also thank them for all the services they do for the residents of Danvers and helping to raise funds for a lot of the youth programs. They do a nice job.
I have no questions. I'll entertain a motion on this.
Public hearing?
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. It is a public hearing. Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak to this agenda item? Seeing none?
Close the public hearing?
Second?
Motion made and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'll now entertain a motion on the agenda item.
So moved as presented?
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Thank you and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, the next agenda item, the board will hear an update by Finance Director Rodney Conley on the fiscal year 2019 third quarter.
The board should have received the quarter 3 update with their agenda packets. Rodney will walk us through the revenue and expenditure highlights. I would just point out something that's not typical on these quarterly updates. At the bottom of the revenue line, we have a 40R item there. Nothing was budgeted. We received $200,000. That, of course, is related to the rezoning that was done at the top of Maple Street. So by establishing the 40R district, based on the number of potential units that were approved by town meeting, the town qualified for and received a $200,000 incentive for establishing the district. It's on here just to show it. What will happen to this money is at the end of this fiscal year, it's going to close out to free cash. But at some point, we have Aaron Henry and David Fields here from Land Use and Community Services. the planning board will at some point start to think about some improvements for the district. We've talked in the past about a facade program or things like that, and this will be funds available to seed a program like that. So everybody knows where it is, and eventually we will be able to appropriate it into an account for those purposes. As those purposes haven't been identified yet, we're allowing it to flow to free cash this year, which will certainly be good for us at year end in terms of our certification. But I did want to point that out before Ronnie got started.
Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chairman. So what you have in front of you this evening is the Quarter 3 update for FY19. Due to the timing of this meeting, I actually updated the numbers through May 1st, so it's actually 82% through the fiscal year. In terms of revenue, nothing jumps out as behind track. Two, to point out, meals tax and hotel motel tax. They're both on track to exceed the estimate as we generally expect in Danvers year over year. Building permits is another one I'd point your attention to. We're already at 629,000, which is over our target for the fiscal year. And since that's the driver of the license and permits category, that means that that category is already at over 100% of estimation. Another one worth pointing out is investment income. This one's already more than doubled our assumption of 160,000. We've brought in 377,000 already year to date. This is another one where, due to a booming economy, it leads to better investment rates for the treasurer. It's one that we conservatively estimate just due to the fact that it's, again, dependent largely on the economy and a little bit outside of our control, other than our shopping around for the best interest rate we can get. That's pretty much it for the revenues. Otherwise, everything else is on track. Most of it's due to timing. On the expense side, we do have some transfers that we'll be doing at the end of the month at town meeting, which we've talked about. Some small transfers in the general government line. Public safety, fire will require a modest transfer. I believe it's about $10,000 from operating to personnel to cover some overtime costs. The only other one that jumps out is slightly over budget is the employee benefits line, which we've talked about. We're currently projecting a $175,000 transfer into that line item at town meeting as well, and that will be coming from some surpluses we've realized in the police salary and wages line item. Overall, we still expect revenues to exceed our estimate and expenditures to come in under appropriation. However, as has been the case in recent years, that gap is tightening each year. So, with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I'll start with Selectman Clark.
I don't think I have any questions at this time. I'm just very appreciative of the income we get from hotel, motel taxes and meals taxes. And this may be an area we might want to look at in the future. I just came back from a vacation. I don't take vacations very often, and especially don't pay my own bills at the hotels very often. And out in San Francisco, your room tax per night for a room in the city is over $100 on top of all the regular fees. 13 different fees were added to the room tax out there.
Same in New York.
Selectman Mills.
No comment. Thanks, Joe. Thank you.
Selectman Lambert.
So it's funny that you brought up the hotel motel, so I've been driving a lot lately, and I was going to bring this up. I noticed on 95 that there's signage, this isn't for you, it's actually for Aaron, but we're talking about it. And we have the blue signs, and it has the gas, directs people to gas and lodging. But like I just drove to Virginia and that, there's always, the blue sign always shows where your restaurants are. Well, Danvers, if you ride 95, that section, they don't direct them to Sapinos, they don't, 466. Then the next one up, we have Calitri's.
That's initiated by the restaurants themselves. You can initiate it.
Well, so it's on the state's blue
They're not taking the initiative to
sign.
do it.
So I think it's something that we should be looking into, because we have a benefit if people come off the highway and use our restaurants. So it's funny you brought that up, because I was thinking of that. When you're in North Carolina and that, they don't miss a trick of getting people, every restaurant, and I don't know if there's a certain radius, but certainly Sapinos, 466, and Calitri's have to be within that. And they're coming from Maine, driving down, so they'd be stopping if they're getting gas. So just a point there. It's good money.
Lack of a Chamber of Commerce to support that.
Anything else?
No, this is fine.
Thank you. Rodney, I see we're making a health insurance transfer again. What can we do to get that number a little closer so we don't have to do transfers?
I can I'll take a shot. So, two things. We discussed during the budget process that we've had a structural issue in the health insurance line for a couple years now. We made changes to the health plan 3 years ago, making the plan a little more expensive, increasing some co-pays, and we had anticipated seeing a decline in membership. As a result of that, we actually saw an increase in membership. So 3 years ago, the budget was not increased by the amount that it otherwise would have been, because we were anticipating some savings that didn't materialize. So we've been chasing that for a couple years. In the budget that's going to town meeting on May 20th, we've addressed part of that through an increase in that appropriation beyond the negotiated renewal rate. The other piece of that we're working to try to resolve is at the negotiating table with the IAC. So we've been engaged with the employees for a number of months now, looking at health plan design changes to potentially implement in fiscal '21. And so this is also one of the goals as part of that process, is to try to correct that so that we're not dealing with this on an annual basis.
So you expect we'll make a transfer again in fiscal
So
'20?
the board did approve, well, the board didn't vote on it because what we presented to the board was an anticipated increase, and it was presented to the finance committee, and they'll be voting that at the special town meeting on May 20th to resolve
you.
that for the current year. Yep.
Okay, that's all, thank you.
Rodney, two questions. Did you say, I know some of these lag and timing is everything on some of these.
Yep.
The hotel motel taxes and meals taxes, is that through Q3 or Q2?
That's through Q3, so we'll get one fourth quarterly payment, which will bring both of those over the anticipated amount.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And then the other one is on North Shore Regional Voc. Have we paid the full amount, or we still have a remaining payment?
That's the full 4 payments.
Okay, so we're not going to pay more than the $2,364,000,
We will not.
which was less than the original budgeted amount.
Correct.
Okay, great. Those are my 2 questions. Any other questions? Great.
Just, Ken, you mentioned, now is North Shore Regional Voc, is that the Essex Aggie?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So there's no more payment on that one. That's the final payment. All right, I have no other questions. Thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to convey?
Nope. That's
Okay.
it. Go Bruins.
Go Bruins, thank you.
We get till 8 o'clock.
Yep, we're speeding along.
You just got here.
All right, thank you.
Is you ready, or do you want us to take a?
Why don't we flip?
So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I think we'll flip-flop Articles 5 and 6, because Sam Cleaves literally just walked in the door, and we'd like to give him a chance to get prepared before he's on.
Absolutely. So the board will hear an update by Land Use and Community Service Director Aaron Henry on various items of interest. Aaron?
And I'll just note, you did receive a memorandum from Aaron with some narrative on most of the items that he's going to talk about on the PowerPoint. So what's on the PowerPoint, it will be largely the same as what's in the memo, but you can follow along in either place.
Thank you.
Good evening,
David,
everybody.
do you want to hit that first light?
Thank you for bearing with us.
Shut the lights
Oh,
on.
everything's working? Okay. So tonight, we just wanted to, now that you're through the budget process for the most part, Mr. Barth and I thought it would be a good time to come to you and kind of give you an update on several of the projects that we've been working on over the last several months. Some of these you have heard of recently, some not so much. So here's a list. And here's a nice picture of Sandy Beach, thinking of summer coming up. So we just, last week, right, 2 weeks ago, on April 24th, we had a meeting here on the downtown corridor projects, which I think the last time we spoke with, this was the following week. We had really good attendance. We had over 40 people in the room. Mr. Bennett, thank you for coming. Much appreciated that. Had a couple planning board members attend. This was one we did over a 400-piece mailing for property owners in the district. Again, as far as these types of meetings go, I would say it was enthusiastically supported at the meeting. We had several landowners follow up with us, and we've had several conversations. I think we just had one yesterday, and we have one more scheduled coming up with landowners in the district. Went really, really well. The plan from here is to hopefully have another community event in June. We'll also be coming back to the Board of Selectmen at your second meeting in June to discuss not just this, but how this fits into a bigger picture of what Mr. Fields and I have been working on, and we kind of want to share that vision with you just to make sure that we're not, getting too far ahead of anybody. We've previewed that with Mr. Barth, and I think you'll find that very informative to kind of see our bigger plan here and what we're working on. So to dive right in, a couple projects have been happening at the high school that I want to share with you.
Just a quick, you can
Yep.
feel free to interrupt Aaron at any time if you want to ask some questions.
There is a game on later, but feel free, yes, absolutely, I'm sorry about that. So two things going on at the high school, one you have probably heard of, the other you might not have heard of. The first one is the basketball court feasibility study, which is happening on the band field here. Earlier this week, there was a site visit with the wetland scientist and the civil engineer that we have working with us on this to take a look at that environmentally, because it is very close to a resource area. There's a stream that runs between the power substation and the field that comes right through here, and there's a collection of water that happens here. So we have to have that assessed to see if that's actually a resource area or not. I will note that in the work, we have asked the consultant to look at the existing court at Holton Richmond as a backup location in case environmentally this proves to be too difficult to look at. We want to have a backup plan just in case. So that's moving ahead, and we hope to have that initial investigation done probably by the end of the month.
Aaron, you say backup plan, do you mean putting a second court next to it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. We just want to make sure that if this
No, it's
can't
not a bad
work,
idea.
or if it's too expensive to deal with the drainage issues and the wetland issues, that we can still have an option to explore, that we might be able to expand the offering that we have.
And as you're doing that, I just would like some feedback too as to how David Mountain feels that that would work into his program. Is it better to have two together, or is it better to have them? I don't know.
Yep.
So
We'll
I'd
absolutely
like
be able to
know
give you that
Yeah.
feedback. Yep.
Thanks.
So that site visit was earlier this week. The other project, and I'm sorry, the aerial's a little tough to see here, but there is a shadow of the current scoreboard. The veterans, the VFW and the Veterans Council has been pressing us to put a flagpole in the stadium itself. There's currently a flagpole, I think it's right here in this island. There's some concern that the attendees in the stadium kind of have to face a weird angle to see that flag, and they think it should be in the stadium. They're working, I don't know if it's final, but they're working with a charitable organization here in town to procure the purchase of a flagpole. We've been working with DPW to find a location that's free of any subsurface issues, because there's actually a large drainage cistern here and some piping. It also solves the problem of providing a flag for this field that's not 180 degrees behind you. So the veterans are going to the school board either earlier this, I'm not sure when their next meeting. It might have happened this week, but it might also be next week. I apologize, I thought it was May 12th. I'm confused on the date. But, so they're going to try to seek their permission, and we just wanted to inform you of this tonight in case you have any concerns, in case the Board of Selectmen have any concerns about this. DPW would be willing to do the install if everybody gives it a thumbs up, and so far, everyone's been giving it the thumbs up. Not seeing any frowns, I will move ahead. So, wanted to give you an update on LaBelle's Grove. I know it's been some time since you've probably seen this. I think I came to you over the summer, letting you know that the Department of Environmental Protection, which helped us acquire the site, had approved of the conceptual plan. At that time, we had some hope that in fiscal '20, we would be able to access more funds for design work going forward to turn this into an actual engineered plan. That turns out that we can kind of leverage ourselves a little bit better. The engineering department would like to do this work in-house, do the actual survey work, and start the design process in-house. That's a very affordable option for us, and so we thought that that was a more prudent way to advance the plans throughout fiscal '20. So that's what we'll be working on in the coming year, turning this into an actual engineered drawing. Seeing no questions, I will move
What
ahead.
does that say, observation? What's that, birdie?
Birding
Birding,
slash
oh.
observation deck.
Is there any problem with the canoe launch touching Middleton? Would that be a problem for us at all?
This one here,
Yeah,
touching,
yeah, well, it looks like you launch it into Middleton.
no, there's no problems. And I think, to be honest, and I don't want to speak out of turn because I wasn't here when this element was actually negotiated with DEP. This is a canoe landing, not a canoe launch. And there was a distinct difference between the two. So I think to your point, that was an issue that was in the original plan, was that was a launch, and that was nixed by DEP. There's the Green Street launch just upstream from this, and there's obviously one across the way in Middleton. I think at the Ipswich River Bridge. I'm not sure what that bridge is called, but there's a launch there on the Middleton side. So that's the plan.
So pretty.
Rail trail expansion, I know we have also touched on this in the last couple of weeks because of the $10,000 warrant article request, but just wanted to kind of tie that all up for you tonight. We're working on phase 1 in red with VHB, our engineering consultant. They're concentrating on the Beaverbrook crossing here and the severe grade change that we have to negotiate at Maple Street. We're also working with VHB and Mass DOT on the state highway layout, which is here in blue. We were hesitant to spend local dollars on right-of-way that we don't control without their permission and without their kind of understanding about what they would accept in that right-of-way. We had that meeting in January. They've given us some direction, and what we're going to do is develop a schematic design that would initiate the project for the TIP, inclusion on the TIP, which is the Transportation Improvement Program, that basically will unlock state and federal funding for this if we are successful. And then basically phase 3 and the remaining elements from phase 1 and 2 hopefully will be hit with the grant that we're looking for, the $10,000 from town meeting to unlock the $240,000 grant from the state.
Before you leave that,
Yep,
Aaron,
I knew that someone had a question.
I've been to most of the meetings and heard discussions and all. How are we gonna ever get past Route 1 and Route 95
Yep.
with this extension? Can you put it in words, like 10 bullet points, or?
Well, basically, we were really lucky. When we went to the meeting, they were really helpful and very supportive. They looked at the images that we provided that day, and they said, this is exactly the same as, I'm going to get it wrong, it was Millis or Medfield. They brought that up, and they showed us exactly how they approved a very similar bike path. I mean, if you didn't know better, you'd think you were looking at Route 1 or 95 in Danvers, but it was in this other community. They gave us basically the roadmap of exactly how to do it. The path will likely be on the south side of the layout. One bridge has room now. The other bridge has a bit of an abutment, but they showed us how they handled that in that example that they provided to us. And the VHB crew knew immediately. They were like, yep, we can do that. So we're still waiting for that schematic design to come back. But they showed us exactly how they wanted to handle that, and we're working on that now.
Aaron, will you get us a picture or
Yep.
map of that?
Yep. Like I said, I was, and I'm not throwing them under the bus, but I was hoping that we would have had that in hand by now,
So
but
when
it
you
just
get it,
didn't come
okay.
together. They did give us, in early February, a very schematic version of the Phase 1 corridor, but it's a very engineering-looking document, and I don't think it would mean anything to anybody if you were to see it. So we're looking for a more polished version in the coming weeks. And we will definitely share that
In
once
that
we
middle
have that.
section, Aaron, is it true, the only really road crossing they have is the deceleration lane coming off 95 North? Everything else is provisions pretty much within the existing sidewalks and/or former railroad right-of-way to accommodate the trail.
There's a
You
little.
gotta cross, I know, you gotta cross Maple Street there,
Yeah, there's,
new Maple
at the
Street.
Nichols Street, there was
Yeah.
a little bit of a design constraint. Do we stay on that side and
Yeah.
cross at the animal hospital back onto,
Yeah.
or do we keep it on road? I think they wanted us to stay off the road as much as possible, and then, I can't remember the name of, it
That's
takes you back to
Hollis
Old
Drive,
Maple.
Hollis Road?
Yeah. They'll probably put us back on the easement for that part, and then to your point, we'll have to cross the off-ramp there. And then the next one is the Conifer Drive,
Intersection?
not Conifer Drive, I
It's
guess.
the old Maple Street.
Yeah, the old Maple Street where that comes down opposite of Conifer Drive. But they looked at that and they said, there's a lot of pavement there. You might not need that slip lane. So again, they gave us some really solid design advice to look at. And then once we get through that, you're in between here, you're at the you're kind of in front of Putnam Pantry, there's plenty of room there. And then you get past Sapino's and you got to deal with that one. But we might be able to go in front there, and then you'd only have to cross at,
Old Maple, the off-ramp on.
yeah, yep. So they gave us some really good advice, and it seemed very, very doable. We did talk about other options about being on that side, and the wetlands on that side, there's a bunch right here that we just didn't want to deal with. We already have the facility, we have plenty of pavement width, so it seemed to make sense to put it on the south side.
And to echo Aaron's point, I think that at the staff level, I think we were pleasantly surprised at the interest the DOT showed in this project. There seems to have been a mindset change. In the past, trails were the jurisdiction of DCR and the environmentalists, and I think they're recognizing that these rail trails are a vital part of the network, transportation network now. So not only, we were hoping they wouldn't sort of thumb their nose at the project, but I think they're actually interested in being actively,
Yep.
a participant both in the design and potentially funding down
Yep.
the road. So it was a really worthwhile and productive meeting that we
Yeah.
had with them.
It's a big public relations.
Absolutely.
And when
Deal
we
for
met
them.
with Senator Lovely and Representative Speliotis,
Yep,
from 20 years ago, didn't get that kind of response, but they were very wonderful to deal with. So there's a whole different attitude at the
Yeah.
state level.
yeah. And really, I mean, I know it's recreation facility in a sense, but for us, it's really about economic development. I mean, I think we've seen the existing path and what it's helped, how it's helped downtown. And this is just, another strong indicator that we want to do this for a number of reasons. So, I'll move on. Sandy Beach, this plan we did bring back to the rec committee, and they've signed off on that. This was included in a warrant article. I believe this was an fiscal 18 warrant article, and this went hand in hand with LaBelle's Grove. This is the same landscape architect that we use for LaBelle's Grove. Really, I know it's hard to see here, so I tried to bullet the changes that you're going to see here. But basically, there's some environmental restoration of the salt marsh here. We want to add a new kayak launch or, a fishing pier. Probably the most significant thing you'll notice is the parking area here, splash pad area here. You might not notice that we are proposing the demolition of the current bathhouse and moving that down to the splash pad area. That needs a little bit of water anyway, so it would make sense to move that down there. We've added the boardwalk. And really, I think what we're trying to do here, as I said in the memo, is everything is scalable, everything is independent, such that, this is a grand vision. If that's not doable, if we have to take this in bites, if we don't want to go with the full-on, largest splash pad in New England, we can downscale that.
What is it called?
A splash pad. So these are it's like a water feature. Basically, it's like sprays up water. So it's not a full pool. There's no collection of water. It's just water features that are spraying up, and the kids run through it. My kids loved it when they were of that age. And so again, this is a feature that we think would be really nice to have in concert with the riverfront access there. So really, we're just trying to spruce that all up. And again, scalable, we can take it in bite sizes. And so that's the plan for Sandy Beach.
The land to the right, is that the condominium area?
Yep,
And they have by law, they
Yes.
have a walkway.
yep.
Are we going to make it contiguous to our walkway?
That has come up. There's a bit of a grade change right here. We're lower than them. We don't have a seawall, they do. We could certainly, we talked about, extending this path here to that. Again, that's not a huge engineering feat to make that connection. This plan, we didn't do that, but that doesn't mean it can't happen.
Given that we have good parking and, it might be just nice to be able to walk the
Yep.
shoreline, as it
Yep.
were.
Yep, that's a great idea. We did talk about it. We just didn't want to inflame the neighbors out of the gate, but that's something that we can deal with. So, any other questions?
We still have that residence in the middle of the,
Yes.
Is that, I don't have this off the top of my head, and I'm asking you now in real time, but
That's
is that
okay.
property identified in the open space plan?
Well, Mr.
I don't
Mountain
think
just
it
walked
is.
in. I don't think it, is
See?
this property identified in the open space plan as one for acquisition?
I believe so. We've been talking about that for quite a while.
I believe it is too.
Mr. Mountain was saying yes. For our TV audience, in case they can't hear him. So, that is something, obviously, this would change the scheme quite a bit.
And of Sandy Beach, the splash pad has already been in the warrant article, right? What has already gone through a warrant article for funding?
Nothing.
So I think it was $6,000 or $8,000 was approved to do some very preliminary conceptual design, which is what's on the
Yeah.
screen. And I think splash pad was one of the amenities referenced. I'd have to go back and reread the warrant, but I believe that amenity might have been
yeah.
referenced in the warrant
It was.
explanation.
Yes.
yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'm just, so really, everything else is not, okay.
Yep.
Aaron, before you leave that,
Yep.
I learned to swim there 65 years ago. That was my mother's neighborhood down the end of River Street. And I used, we used that sandy beach a lot when we were like 5th or 6th grade.
Yep.
Don't laugh. Is there any way to extend the tide? In other words, once the tide is like half out or something, there's no more beach. I'm just wondering, is there any way to topographically give it a couple more hours of water? Just a thought, when we're planning.
We'll have to dive into that. I know one of the things that we think we need to include is a restoration of the grass, the salt marsh grasses, so that might be something that we can talk about with the regulators. This is going to need Chapter 91 approvals, Army Corps of Engineer approvals. So that's something we can certainly discuss when we get to that phase. That's a good idea, and we'll look into it.
And if the discussion doesn't come to fruition under this plan, we should consider what we're going to do for our next dredging project. We have a dredging project that's going to come up in a few years and may not play out
Yep.
in the Sandy Beach restoration or, reclamation,
Yep.
but it may be a planning point when we
Yep.
come to dredging.
Yep. Excellent. Yep. Good point. Okay. Moving on. I think I'm staying with water now. This is one I think we started hearing from the public again in the last couple of months about access to the waterfront. And there was an initiative that the town did in the mid-'90s to open up a few of the rights of way that we have that run right to the water, and kind of make it clear to the neighborhood that you have rights of access at these points. In the end, we did, in the mid-'90s, we signed 5 locations as public access points. They were Brad Street, Choate, Bates, Mead, and Eden Glen. At the moment, only Mead Street still has a sign up, and given its condition, I'm guessing that somebody down there is maintaining that, because they've disappeared everywhere else, and the encroachments have started to happen again. So as stated in the memo, we will be in the coming weeks, be looking to kind of take these back a little bit, re-sign them, and provide a butter notification where the encroachments are a little more obvious. So that's a good thing. The other thing I want to note here is we're going to be referring Choate to the River Committee for a possibility of like passive recreation amenities, like maybe a picnic table, benches, something like that. That's a beautiful little spot. That's, those are the condos, I think, at the end of, at John George.
McDougal Ave,
What's up?
McDougal Ave.
And that's at Eden Glen. You're looking straight across at Sandy Beach. So these are beautiful spots, super important for the community to know that they have the rights to these spots. The other piece of it that's not imaged here is we're also working with New England Power on figuring out if we can get access back to Wrights Beach. That's kind of been a hot button topic on and off over time, and we're talking to them about trying to open that back up for public access.
think that there's more deep, I think that that beach area, if you call it a beach, that has more, the tide is not as cruel there.
Correct.
To the water
Yeah.
depth.
Yep.
And this was initiated by a former River Committee meeting member from many, many years ago who did the initial work and brought it to Diane and I last fall, late fall. I think you talked to him as well. We want to thank Darrell for his, for bringing this to the town's attention and reinvigorating
Yep.
the open space or the open use of this,
Yep.
of this property.
Yep.
I've
So-
got a couple of comments. Are you aware of access, public access from Hardy Street into the river? It's a kind of a unique access.
Hardy was one of the ones that was researched in the 90s. I'm not familiar with the details, but that was looked at in the 90s and for some odd reason not chosen at that time.
Okay, because some of the residents down there approached me about that one, and it's kind of unique in that it affords an access to the river between Spite Bridge or Liberty Street Bridge and upriver, so that from that location, you could actually canoe, kayak, or whatever, all the way up to the Holton Richmond, which you can't from any of these other locations.
Okay.
And it's just another access. I looked at the map, and there is a split access down there, and it's somewhat of a pathway still kept down to the river for that.
We'll look into that. Yeah, I know there's a manila folder in the
Yeah,
file on
okay.
it, and I'm not sure why it wasn't pursued at that time.
And the other one, just for your information, Wrights Beach down there, my father used to live in Danvers 100 and some years ago. That was one of the public, not a public, but it was one of the commonly used
Yeah.
beaches before they took out the gravel pit that was down there. And it's a natural beach that is much better than Sandy Beach was,
Yeah.
because Sandy Beach was just a mud flat.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're trying to get back to, is that the folks with longer memories remember when that was accessible, and we like to explore if we can make
I
it
know that the
once
abutters
again.
aren't too happy about the town exploring this, but it is the power company's property.
Yep, yep.
To you, Mr. Town Manager, if we haven't already done so, can we close this loop with Mr. Parker and let
Yeah,
him know?
we'll reach out to, sure.
Yeah.
We'll reach out to
Let him know
Darrell.
this is planning, it's good planning, and I think he should be
Absolutely.
with our thanks.
He approached me the morning of the Little League Parade about this.
So
We'll double back with them,
we started this last fall, and I think, yeah, double back with him and let him know that
absolutely.
his work has fruition.
Yep. All right, moving on. Endicott Park. We have the next couple have to do with Endicott, but on this slide, I wanted to highlight the land swap that we've been working on with the Historical Society at Glen Magna Farm, and also the fishing pier at Goodnow Pond. That was money we got through the state legislature, that we got $100,000 to make a handicap accessible fishing pier at the pond. It's hard to see here, but basically, if you're familiar with it, there's a platform right here on that corner. So we delayed that project a little bit because of the hay barn project, which needed to do a survey of this entire area. So rather than kind of double survey, we put the fishing pier on hold so that we could get this whole area surveyed. That's now in-house, and we're gonna be able to move forward on the fishing platform. So we're make more of those dollars for construction and implementation than they would have been otherwise. The land swap with Glen Magna didn't come together in time for annual town meeting this year. We still hope to make it to the fall. It will require a home rule petition, but basically, this little tail here, we kind of, treat as our own. The parking lot, which is on ours, operates for them. So we want to straighten this land ownership out. Town meeting actually did approve this decades ago, but since intervening law has come into play that requires us to do more of a process now than we would have then. If we had acted quickly back then, we wouldn't be here and we'd have straightened out land parcel ownership, but we have to correct that. So again, we're on target, hopefully, for the fall town meeting to straighten this out.
If that's the current state, what is the proposed state, roughly?
Yeah, I knew, essentially, here's the carriage road.
Yep.
We are going to own everything, I'll say,
Yep.
south of this. And then we're going to give them the parking lot with an easement for us to get through. There's a road that kind of sneaks around the back here. We would own everything on the park side of that road. And the exchange is just about even on area. So again, we're using logical landmarks that are out there on the ground. There will be some easements, so like, again, their main entry to the gate, to the Glen Magna is here. We're proposing giving them a little bit of access over that carriage road to get in. They're giving us access through here. So the deal is basically, the land part is done. Now it's having to go to the legislature and straighten it all out. So,
And the issue Aaron mentioned is that Chapter 30B changed a great deal in the 30-some-odd years since. So town meeting voted to approve this, and for a variety of reasons, it was never fully executed. But because of Chapter 30B, some additional steps have to be taken in order for this. I think our view, the staff, the rationale for making the swap that was logical in 1985 remains logical today. We are basically the sole users of that triangular piece for a lot of our park programming. They're basically the sole users of that parking lot for the mansion. It's almost an even swap, but some of the steps we have to follow today that we didn't have to follow in the 80s, we'll have to do an appraisal, so we'll do that this summer. We'll need to seek a waiver from the state because the land parcels aren't perfectly even, so there may be a small designation of park space as Chapter 97 land that we have to do somewhere else to make this happen. So the Historical Society was, they were hoping to see it ready for this town meeting. They understand that these steps have to be taken, so we're going to take our time and get things lined up for the fall, and then see if the town meeting still agrees. Well, first see if the board still agrees, but then see if the town meeting still agrees that this makes sense.
Before you leave that,
Yep.
Aaron, now fishing
yes,
at Goodnow Pond.
yes.
What kind of fish are there in Goodnow Pond to be caught?
The kind little kids like to catch.
Sunfish, shiners, you can't have pickerel.
There's bass in there.
I'm sorry?
There's bass in there.
No.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, we try not to catch the turtles, but there's turtles.
I'm a specialist from the mill pond when I was a kid. We caught all, and people still use, on Sylvan Street.
Oh, yeah.
From time to time, there's
Yeah.
people that are fishing in
Yeah.
there. So I've never been up there, but I'll get Billy to come up with me and try to catch a bass.
I know my father-in-law took the kids repeatedly when we first moved to town. He would disappear with the kids down there. It's really, and not to go into it right here, also what's happening is there's like a drainage problem there. So it's going to be kind of shoring up that corner, getting a more accessible platform for you to get out onto the pond for. So
can't wait.
it solves a couple of problems. It solves the drainage problem that we're facing, and it provides better access to the pond itself. So
You say
it's a
Bill.
great project.
Do that.
Aaron, since you're in this position now, I have a concern just behind the fishing platform, and Dave may remember when this was so, there was an accessible trail that went out to Glendale Drive. We used to use it on a regular basis from our neighborhood. Back in the early 70s, a family by the name of Moulton bought a piece of parcel of land at the corner of Glendale, right next to the Scarmuses, and proceeded to put a house on there with 32-foot frontage. But there was supposed to be an agreement that there was an accessible way from Glendale Drive through the front of where their lot was onto Glen Magna. Subsequently, the flooding with the beavers, et cetera, I'm told now has flooded most of that walkway. It used to be a cow path out to the pasture where the nightclub is up there now. I'm just wondering if there is any accessible way to go from Glen Magna out to Glendale Drive now. It would start right by the huge rhododendrons, right by
Then you hit the pond.
the fish pond.
Yeah, I was saying we can only get so far, and then it just gets too wet.
It's really too bad because that was a main thoroughfare for a whole neighborhood to get in there to use Glen Magna. And it was, I'm told that one of the landowners, the budding landowners, has tried to exclude people from going through that property onto Glendale Drive, and we have a right to do so. They were given the right to have a lot with only 32-foot frontage, but we had that paper street for access to the back part of that property.
By the way, David, you'll know that Family Festival has the Mike Gordon Fishing Derby, which is at the Mill Pond every year.
I won the pie eating contest. The YMCA used to have a fishing derby, and it was kind of on the lawn before the pavilion. And all I could do that year was eat with a blueberry pie eating contest. I was in the 4th grade. Okay.
Thank you.
Dave?
I remember Mike Gordon very well, and he used to bring his own fish sometimes.
No further questions
you
on
bring
this.
your
I'll
own
move on
pies?
to the other Endicott Park Hay Barn. I started in June, I think shortly after probably a week or two into my tenure, we selected a firm, Spencer Sullivan and Voigt, to assist us with this project, an architecture firm. This was what the mission of the renovation was to achieve. The board appointed a committee, I think, last February, I think we determined. Since bringing on SSV, the architect, we've met with them 4 times to really try to flesh this out. So here's a picture of the barn to orient you. The group has not formally voted on the image I'm going to show you next. It's consensus support. We've explored a number of options, and after talking about, while the project itself is with the cost estimators right now, we knew enough to kind of eliminate some of the other options that we had developed because of price. So the one I'm going to show you is what we're working on. Now, here's the door. These are the barn doors that's facing the children's barn. Here's the doors facing the parking lot behind the barn. Right now, this is the side that's facing the north lawn, and this is the back, and the corn cob. Is it the corn cob house? Corn crib is right here. So what we learned in this process is that to occupy the barn, regardless of what type of event you want to put in it, if you want to use it as a place of assembly, it requires it to meet certain building code and life safety requirements. That needs, loading on the building needs to be improved. Insulation of the building would need to be improved. And so what these 2 additions allow us to do is to kind of achieve that without having to structurally alter the framework of the building itself. This would, and again, we talked a lot, and I know Ms. Langley was there for many of these conversations. What we wanted to do inside the barn, we didn't want to hide all of the framework. So these additions will allow us to keep the exposed beams there. We will likely have to do something with the roof and maybe cover the insulation with barn board, but we didn't want to have to do that in the main space. We also learned that the barn itself, the area of this floor, is quite small compared to other barns. And to add these elements, to add restrooms for a place of assembly, to talk about adding some sort of kitchen to the facility, if we were trying to do that on this floor plate, we would have nothing left at the end of the day that would make sense. We explored putting them in the basement. The options there weren't very good. It was raise the barn up, redig a new basement, put the barn back down. That was prohibitively expensive. So we decided that this addition on the back kind of served 2 masters. It shores the building up for a code perspective. It allows us to keep the interior relatively unscathed, and then we get to add these elements outside of that, outside of the usable space. The entry vestibule, similar thing. It allows us to do some bracing, allows us to add some, coat room and some storage for these things without detracting from what is actually quite a small floor space. So that, I think, is the general plan that the cost estimators are now working with. I was hoping to have those numbers for you tonight. They're not quite ready yet. But they did give us some very nice images to look at. So this is obviously an aerial view of what the barn would look like if you were kind of floating above the pond looking back. It's the children's barn. Lot of discussion. I can't say how good the firm has been. It's been quite enjoyable. We've looked at a lot of information they've provided. They gave us a snazzy watercolor. This is, again, the children's barn is in the background here, and then they flip it over, and this is from the children's barn looking in. So very tastefully done, I think, modest additions that don't overwhelm the main structure that we've got here. So again, the committee hasn't voted on this yet, but this was kind of where we ended up after knowing what we think is achievable. So again, what's been done, we've done the comparative market research. I think we've looked at over about a dozen similar type facilities in the area and beyond. We've researched the building design options, obviously structural and mechanical, we're front and fore in that work. We've looked at landscaping and parking. What's to come? It's in the hands of the financial modeling and the cost estimators right now. Going forward, we hope to have some sort of an open house where we can share this concept before we finalize anything. Obviously, we want to return to you before anything is, solidified, and we want to go to the Recreation Committee as well. And then ultimately, if we get that far, we'd be looking to go to town meeting. So, I'm sure there's more questions, but that is the end of the presentation.
Questions, board members? Feel free.
Actually, a little early to ask questions. They're still designing and figuring out the cost.
But this would be a
The proof
great
is in
time
the
to hear
pudding.
red flags. I mean, if there's just something that you saw there that's just,
Thinking questions on the presentation.
What is the
The presentation is wonderful, but we got a lot of
Yep.
hope and desire to create projects on the beach, the Bells Grove, the Hay Barn. We've got a lot on our plate, a lot in the hat. I don't know how we can do them all at one time. It needs to be phased in,
Yep.
obviously.
Yep.
So, I mean, those are the type of questions I'll ask when you come back to
Yep.
us with cost, timing, and where is the priority? Which project do we want to put our work
think-
into first,
And
second,
again,
third?
Yeah, and I think June, we'll start to get into those sorts of details in June, when we revisit the kind of the long-term financial picture in terms of where we are. Most of what Aaron just presented are projects that, town meeting saw enough interest in having ideas to at least talk about. So to your point, there is no scenario where all these projects can move forward at the same time. So there does need to be some prioritization. From a timing perspective, the Hay Barn one is probably the most time sensitive because we have $1 million grant from the state. So
And that's the one that the cost will escalate the most on. for
I
the
think that's right,
construction.
and I think, we're farthest ahead right now in terms of, the committee's been working awfully hard for a year. Once the cost estimators are complete, then we can really start to have some real conversations about, the work of the committee and the possible uses of that space and in that. But completely agree on the other point, there will have to be a lot of phasing and strategy in terms of how and when and if. I think the recent developments on the rail trail present an interesting opportunity. I mean, one of the things we know is that as we get these projects closer to shovel-ready, there are certain funding streams that open up to us that don't exist otherwise. So, we heard from the DOT that we may be eligible for some funding for the rail trail project. That we may find that the design money we got fronted on this might have been a very strategic investment because they may take it and run with it. So.
And unfortunately, the Bells Grove and Sandy Beach that we've been talking about the longest
Yep.
probably don't take the priority.
But there may be opportunities to, as Aaron, you can't build a barn piecemeal, but you may be able to develop a passive recreation site
Right.
piece by piece, so we can
and that's
prioritize.
everything we've been trying to keep an eye on is it scalable? Can it be done in phases such that as we can, there's elements we can knock off the list? So we've tried to keep that in mind.
So I appreciate the presentation and wrapping it all into a nice little neat package, but it's not a neat package at
Yeah.
the end of the day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's some hard policy choices. Yep.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that there's a plan, that's something that, I keep asking for, and that instead of one thing at a time, and let's try to do this, and we've gotten the money up front to start looking at, can we do it, or, is it a feasible project? And each of these is not coming at us all at once. I've been on 3 of these committees, and they're all at different stages, they're all gonna take different lengths. What I love is that we're looking at different projects throughout the town, and we've got a plan. Just like the basketball courts, gung-ho about them being at the high school, but maybe that's not the best idea. So I love that that we're taking the time. This isn't, we have to have a basketball court tomorrow.
Right.
We're not reacting. This is a plan, and that's what, that's what I say about everything we do in this town. We need to have some plans. Of all the committees I'm on, and it's usually a sports thing, The bond committee has actually been one of my favorites. It's quite a diverse group. Thank you to all the town workers, building inspector, David, you, engineers, everything coming in and giving us their expertise. I learned about wind, that, yeah, maybe we have to have something on both sides, because the wind could cause problems to the actual barn itself. And John Cohane explaining about every type of kitchen there is. I mean, this hasn't been something like we're just going to create something. And then just what I'm watching happen here, because I have not seen the last design either, is it all came back to what we started with, which is we want to keep the beauty of the barn inside. And so everything ended up being around it. We no longer wanted to build walls inside, and so I love that. But I'm telling you, I learned more about kitchens and wind and foundations and windows and doors, and it's been quite fascinating because I've never belonged to a historical anything. So I think it's great work. But each project, the Sandy Beach, I can't tell you how many people have said to me, I don't know how they all know about this splash pad. They don't pay attention to anything else. But when are we getting this splash pad? Because, most people didn't even know we had a sandy beach.
Right.
And I remember, I'm laughing at him because that's where I learned how to open my eyes underwater. They'd wrap rocks in tinfoil. I can't believe I opened my eyes in that water. But, just most of the kids now.
Very clean water. It's very clean water.
Not back then it wasn't. You stepped in and you went a foot down. So, right? It was slush. But, so I love that you're finding a positive thing to Sandy Beach, because the view is starting to become beautiful, the dredging and everything. So this is, I hear from people mostly that have to do with wanting to be outside and all these projects. LaBelle's Grove had a couple of setbacks with design with the state. I think we were set back almost a year when that came forward. And so, but we're plugging forward, and this is the beauty of it, continuing to have a plan. And as each thing gets done, we look at funding. I know the town manager's been looking at a couple of things as it's moved a little further. And Aaron, of course, I know you're giving them the information, but we like to give them a plug here and there. But, it's like, we need to do more of this with everything. I say it about our town buildings. I say it about everything. The plan is great. You don't do one thing at a time. You have to have things going forward. So I think this work is great. I love this report, and I really appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I got to turn it over to Sam, but you have your
We'll
power.
return to agenda item number 5. The board will hear a presentation by Planning Director David Fields and MAPC Representative Sam Cleaves on the town's hazard mitigation plan.
Mr. Chairman, as they set up, I'll, just a quick note, I believe it was several months ago, the board did receive a draft of the updated hazard mitigation plan, and Selectman Bennett, I believe, read the plan and had some questions about the plan, and had requested that we get kind of an update and a presentation from staff, and also from Sam Cleaves from MAPC, who was really kind of the key point person in developing the update to this plan. So we didn't provide, we didn't recirculate the plan itself, but we did, David prepared a PowerPoint which did go out Friday, which we'll have up on the screen momentarily.
We're just going to go straight.
We'll just go from the paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for having us this evening. Slight twist on what Steve said. We were thinking that in the sake of time, there is a game on. Sam might just answer any questions that you may have, as you probably know what the plan's about. If not, Sam can answer that. And the slideshow might be a bit extraneous. So I'll turn it over to Sam. Sam Cleaves, Principal Planner for Metropolitan Area Planning Council. So feel free to fire away.
So I'd like to start with Selectman Bennett. He did request the details, and he seems to be racked and ready.
Well, it was interesting in reading this, and our biggest issue, obviously, is floods and storms, which you can't predict, snowstorms, rainstorms. What did we get, rain 23 days of the last 27 or something? And so I think identifying these areas that are subject to flooding is very important, so that we have a plan. And I'm going to just ask, we have a hazardous mitigation plan, and we're also looking at a climate change resiliency plan. What are the differences or the similarities of those two types of plans?
Well, Mr. Bennett, I can only speak directly to the hazard mitigation plan. I'm not completely aware of what other activities the town is doing in terms of.
Well, the state has grant money
it-
for towns for
Right,
climate change resiliency plans.
Right, I assume
Right.
that you're referring to the municipal vulnerability
Correct.
preparedness.
I can't
plan.
say that word.
Right. There is some overlap.
Okay.
Very much so. One of the key differences is that the MVP program, for ease of saying it, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Plan, really is a new concept that was advanced by Governor Baker under an executive order a couple years ago to really start putting some money into resilience planning and adaptation. The Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan is a FEMA federally required plan that every 5 years, the town is required to update. And basically, it allows the town to go after FEMA federal grants, uncapped grants, that have largely dealt with infrastructure and infrastructure and public safety upgrades from a wide range. The resilience plan really deals with a couple other elements as well, both from an environmental point of view, preserving wetlands, looking at areas where you're going to have impacts from sea level rise, from where storms, some overlap around the parks and beaches. Some of the areas that we looked at have been impacted by storms, Sandy Beach, Endicott Park, and so forth. So they draw on each other, to answer your question. The Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan update is an update of a previous plan that was adopted by the town in 2012. And it's somewhat of a pro forma in that it allows the town to continue to draw on these federal funds, which are very handy. The town has gotten a couple of grants to do some drainage work on this. So at this point, they're just starting to draw on each other because climate resilience is a relatively new thing that's been introduced. We do touch on resilience planning within the natural hazard mitigation effort, and the MVP, we didn't interact directly with the Danvers MVP effort, so we weren't as able to draw on that plan as we would have liked. But there's a lot of similarities, but some differences.
All right, thanks, Sam.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
Yep.
Page 62 of your original mitigation plan talks about impacts sea level rise.
Yep.
So this says that the seas have risen the equivalent of 11 inches over the last 100 years, based on data from 1921 to 2016.
Right.
And I think we all can agree that will accelerate over the next 50 years.
Well, there's a lot of debate on that question as to what exactly we're going to be seeing. There's a range. Most of the, if you look at the IPCC reports, which is what most people follow, the international protocols on climate change through the United Nations, I believe. There's a range, and generally in this area over by 2100, it could be a range of 2 to 6 feet of sea level rise. Some people now feel that the consensus is that concentrations of greenhouse gases are rising a little quicker than we had thought, and there are other issues that scientists hadn't been aware of. So the consensus that I'm aware of is that sea level rise is proceeding a little bit quicker. Most DPWs, for instance, when you're looking at a plan of that nature, the horizon for town planning and infrastructure for most DPWs that I've worked with is the outside is about 40 years, just because of the planning models, the way the town works, and the way that funding works within that. People are beginning to look at longer term issues, but really in terms of infrastructure and the long term stuff, this is sort of a new field for communities to deal with, because like most communities, they deal with yearly budget, maybe a 5-year capital plan. A lot of this stuff, and Danvers included, that we talk about is folded in within your capital planning process, much to the town's credit. Other towns are getting with that program, but To get back to your original question, there's a range on sea level rise right now of about 2 to 6 feet, probably a couple of feet over the next 50 years, and then maybe up to 6 or plus feet by 2100.
So not to be facetious, but I guess that might put Sandy Beach underwater,
Yes.
so that's something we
No,
ought to be.
it's not being facetious at all. It's a real threat. And really, the state is just now trying to come to grips with that. There's a lot of erosion problems, severity of storms. What you get is extremes of no precipitation and then heavy precipitation in periods of drought. And people are trying to figure out what the interval is on this and how severe this stuff will be. So
So I appreciate the town and you updating our plan and I assume you'll do it again in 5 years.
absolutely, and by then I'm sure it'll be even more integrated with all the local planning.
Great, that's what I'm looking forward to.
Sure.
Thanks for your
Thank you.
comments, appreciate
Thanks
it.
for your
Thank you.
questions.
Okay?
Yep.
Selectman Clark, anything?
I forgot, I wish I'd brought the plan with me tonight, because I did spend several nights reading it over. And the minor points that I have a complaint that the DPW still characterizes their winter snow fighting with sand and salt. And I just wish that they'd be truthful with the people in Danvers. And I looked it up, found out from previous DPW people that Danvers has not used sand in the snow fighting operation since 1983. We're using salt. The salt has had major impacts in the town. It's had impacts on the meadow not freezing. It's had impacts on many of the major highway streets in town where it's actually killed the grass 3 to 6 feet back from the street on a regular basis. If you want to see evidence of it, you can come up my street. You can go many of the main streets in town. You cannot grow grass between the sidewalk and the street. It's caused by the salt. A fear that I always had in the past, and I tried to bring it to the attention of 3 of the previous fire chiefs, was brush fire potentials. It's getting much less now because they've built up Folly Hill. It used to be an annual major fire event. But I actually lived in fear at my house where I am right now until they regrettably built 20 houses behind me and took out 15 acres of woods. But one of the least maintained and I think most potentially hazardous woods in town is the 46 acres of Endicott Park, where they're talking about putting a Frisbee park in right now. There's been significant damage over the winter storms over several years, generations, if you will, of a lot of deadfall in that woods area. In my lifetime, it's burnt over 3 times, and every time that it caught fire, it went all the way from Forest Street over to Pine Street. The fire department was unable to put the fire out because it was so intense. Since then, there has been streets made into that area, and they've got access to water now that they didn't have 20 or 30 years ago in that area. But there are some areas in town, I'll give you one little example, is a block that's bordered by Ingersoll Street, used to be called Dean Street. It's now the parking lot for the dog park, Forest Street and Alma Lane. In between about 6 houses in there, there's about a 15-acre field, a wooded area that is just a dump. Neighbors have dumped trash in there for years. It's got all kinds of deadfalls, and it's a potential big brush fire problem. When I was first on the board, it came to my attention that the fire department did not have almost any firefighting hoses left. They'd let them slip. They hadn't replaced them. And we did get them replaced, I think, about 10 years ago, where each of the major first alarm response pumpers had 300 feet of hose, which should allow them to get into some of the areas. But in recent years, there was a fire up on Reservoir Drive that went behind the properties up there quite fast, and it took out virtually everyone's back fence, their sheds, et cetera, because there's so much, again, dead brush, et cetera, in these areas, and they just couldn't keep up with it. We're not as bad as California, and I'm not suggesting that we send people out with rakes to rake the woods like some of our esteemed national leaders have said will solve these problems. However, we do have some pockets of areas, the town forest is another one, that have not been, I don't say maintained because naturalists want to see it go natural, but there's certain points where if you have a tremendous amount of trees, like we had all the ash trees in the area die in the last 10 years, a lot of the birch trees were broken off with winter snowstorms. There's a lot of dead fodder there ready to go. Up behind St. Richard's Church is a prime example. I don't want to belabor the fact. It's just one other area that I have concerns about is the fire danger in some areas where residences are close to wooded areas. we see an area down across the street from Brown's Pond, which used to be a field when I was a kid, part of the rest farm behind the condominiums, is all grown up to trash trees in there in the last 10 years. It's a potential fire hazard. The phragmity grass along the rivers over by where Parker's Island used to be is now all a boatyard, is a potential fire hazard for some of these houses. So we've really got to be careful with those type of things, I believe. The only flood damage, the only flood problems, I think, is that with our mill pond, we do have to make sure that the gates are opened when there's a major rain event going to be occurring. We don't want to see the flooding we had 3, 4 years or 5 years ago when Sylvan Street was flooded over, right over to the walls, and it was running over like a waterfall into the cemetery from the mill pond. That was, yes, a lot of water coming down, but it was also human mistakes not opening the gates out of the pond fast enough. So we have to be really alert to those kind of things. Microbursts, we can't predict them, obviously, anywhere with hurricanes, tornadoes. I've seen 3 microbursts go through my property in the last 40 years. I've lost 19 trees in one of them. The last time that it happened, it tore out a couple of trees by the street, tore off a weather vane off our barn and some other things. It was pretty intense when that happens in areas. And we've had several microbursts in town. So, you know, I think we're addressing that somewhat with the aggressive, proactive tree trimming that the mayor company is doing for electric light, et cetera. But I still think it could be a problem. That's my only, I guess those are my concerns from this hazard mitigation plan. I know that we don't have any, I'm not worried about any earthquakes and landslides, and I'm living in a place that's going to be a nice island when all of the water floods, melts in the Arctic. You can come visit me if you want to on Clock Island. All right, that's it.
I have a question for the board, and maybe for Steve. I believe that Martin Pillsbury sent you a certificate of adoption.
Yes, I have it, and I'll
for
read it
signing.
after all the
Great.
questions.
I just wanted to be clear because you guys, the plan has been approved by FEMA, and the town will be good to go from the moment that you sign that for the next 5-year period. So I just wanted to make sure we could clear that up tonight.
We will.
Great.
Selectman Mills, any questions? Selectman Lamley.
We don't have a copy of that, right?
I'm going to read it.
Oh. This is not my field of expertise at all. However, I did see Boston flood out at the seaport and can't believe a new development was so poorly planned. I'm just looking at your plan update, your mitigation measures for the plan update. Again, when they were doing Frostbrook, I thought it just really looked good. I didn't understand the reasoning. But you have a couple of suggestions here, and one is complete generator upgrades. I guess I don't understand how that fits into this at the Smith School. And are we doing that? It's part of the plan?
Mr. Town Manager?
Say that one more
He
time?
wasn't listening to me.
I was listening, but I was also
Just jotting notes.
crunching some
I'm
numbers.
just having too much fun with you.
Endorse.
Smith School, the generator upgrade, so did we do that in our plan? It's part of the mitigations, you know, suggestions and?
I'd have to we have yeah.
We typically, what we do when we work together, the hazard mitigation safety team we talk to fire and school and see what's been upgraded, because that's typically a power outage issue with high winds or storms. So that's why it's addressed through the schools, obviously, town hall, municipal facilities, and the shelter. I think
I'm
that
not
we
gonna
did
sign
cover
it. I don't
that,
think we've
and
got
All right, it's just, I mean, it's
Proper.
a
Yep.
new upgrade, so I just want to make
Point
sure.
at a point of time
And
to
then, I would
have
think
input in
that
that.
for us to get a street snow blower, it doesn't make any sense. How many areas do we have that would even need such a?
Plan was approved 5 years ago.
Did you identify those areas?
don't have the areas in my head. That was a DPW ask. And typically FEMA won't give you money to buy snow removal equipment.
Give it to me.
But we encourage people to put down everything they think that is important. They were concerned with fast removal of large amounts of snow to get safety equipment out in a hurry.
Oh, okay.
When you don't have a plow available or they're out. So when we get 15, 18 inches of snow at night through a storm, they need to move it quickly so they can get at their equipment.
Well, I didn't get to see the final plan, but
Right.
I do read a lot, and I did read
Great.
about the glaciers are melting at a faster rate, and that's why there's such a concern. So I do understand that part of it, but thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. This is the document, this is the binder that we got about a month and a half ago. Yep. So, as you said, the plan has been done and verified by the DEP?
No, by
sorry.
MEMA and FEMA.
MEMA and
They
FEMA.
both reviewed it and found it satisfactory.
And so.
And it's an update of a plan we
We had
approved 5 years ago.
Yes.
Right, this is a resolution adopting the Town of Danvers Hazard Mitigation Plan 2019 update. So it says, whereas the Town of Danvers established a committee to prepare the Town of Danvers Hazard Mitigation Plan 2019 update, and whereas the Town of Danvers Hazard Mitigation Plan 2019 update contains several potential future projects to mitigate potential impacts from natural hazards in the Town of Danvers, and whereas duly noticed public meetings were held by the Emergency Management Team and Conservation Commission on June 28th, 2018, and October 11th, 2018, and whereas the Town of Danvers authorized responsible departments and/or agencies to execute their responsibility demonstrated in the plan, now therefore be it resolved that the Town of Danvers Board of Selectmen adopts the Town of Danvers Hazard Mitigation Plan update in accordance with MGL 40, Section 4 of the Charter and Bylaws of the Town of Danvers.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much for your hard work. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr.
So
Chairman
everybody.
and members of the board.
Thank you.
For your time.
Thanks for coming tonight, Sam.
Oh, really?
First 4 minutes.
1-1,
All right.
1-1.
Under one already?
Yes.
All right. The town manager will report to the board on various items of interest.
I was going to ask what time the game started, but I guess I got my answer.
8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll try to be brief. I
you
do have
staying?
a few updates that I'd like to provide you tonight.
Aaron, are you staying?
I'm not staying.
Okay, there was an item that, if you don't mind, for a minute,
Why don't I start with the item that may...
that I'm referencing, yes.
So, Jalbert Lane?
Yes.
I'll start with Jalbert. I have an update for you, Bill, but you're going to have to wait a minute. You did receive a memorandum in your packets on Friday, actually from Susan Fletcher, but Aaron can speak to some of the aspects of that. It's related to a town-owned piece of property that was taken in 1956 for $12.59. The Housing Trust did some background work and identified that this would be a suitable location for an affordable housing unit similar to what was approved a couple years ago at Lorraine Road. The memo itself goes into some of the details. There's a bit of a timing issue here in terms of some funding that the town is eligible for through HOME, which I believe is federal funding.
It's state funding.
State funding. Is it federal in?
Yeah, it's a
starts and is it
combination.
passive?
Yeah. It's a passive.
So what you have tonight is a kind of a summary of what the trust has been looking at and an update on some of the outreach that they've been doing and are actively doing as we speak in the next week or so, with the idea of coming back to the board in June to see if the board was interested in pursuing this as an affordable housing unit. I know Gardner's been involved with that process. So with that, I think I'd turn it back over to you, Gardner, if you'd like to add down to that.
So, as you know, I represent the board on the Affordable Housing Trust, and we have had several public meetings. I'm sorry, I should rephrase that. All our meetings are public meetings, of which, in the past several, we've talked about opportunities of different properties in town. We are very sensitive to the last time we came before the board. Communication is always a chicken and egg thing. Do we start with the selectmen ahead of the local residents that may be affected? Do we start with the residents, then come to the selectmen? We're kind of doing it dual track at this point. We're also very sensitive to the consideration of how much the town has contributed to the social improvement or of these projects. And so we have funds that the state, it starts with a federal grant that goes to the state then passes it on to the local cities and towns. But they're a use it or lose it opportunity. You only have so much time to use these funds, and then they revert back to the state it goes into a massive pool and they do other things with it and we don't necessarily get it back. So we've looked at this property on Jalbert Lane and we've talked about the opportunity of doing a purchase from the town for a number that I'd like not to say today until we get a little further down the road, although it's in your memo. I'd ask, which is not a considerably small amount of money, and that we could purchase this property, do an RFP as we have in the past, which would include language that says that the home built would be conducive to the area homes. We wouldn't overbuild on the property. It would be a single-family opportunity in conforming to the neighborhood standards. So we have sent letters to the abutters and the abutters of the abutters, and we have our next Affordable Housing Trust meeting next Wednesday, the 15th. We did offer to go and meet with any of them that wanted to meet with us directly. I know that Susan Fletcher has fielded calls from several of them. They have asked some very important questions that we will be prepared to answer. Again, we are trying to tread the communication minefield of who gets identified, who gets notified first. We don't want you surprised. We don't want you to get calls by members of the public about something that you haven't heard about. And we would be returning back to, the trust would be returning back to the Board of Selectmen based on a positive outcome of the meetings that we're going to have, the public that we're going to have next week, Wednesday, and make a proposal to the selectmen.
So you're not looking for a decision tonight,
No,
but
we
at
are
our
not.
next meeting?
Probably at our next meeting, the meeting after. We will, by that time, have even more information and more details. We're trying to be very cognizant of, we know you may get calls, and we don't want you to get calls about things you had not heard about. What you've got is a letter that was presented to the neighbors. You know as much as they know now at this point. Our meeting minutes are public, and we just wanted to inform you.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, so you'd be comfortable.
I've got a question about it. When I looked at this, that's R2 zoning, is that correct, that area?
I'd have to look at the, do you recall? It
Okay,
might, probably
it is
says
R2.
right here
It
on
is
the
R2.
card,
Okay,
the
yeah,
card
it's
is
R2.
attached.
I know
Says on
that-
the card.
I know that the next street over, Bradstreet Avenue, contains a number of duplexes going down on the right-hand side in
Where's
front of
two? What is R2?
R2, I know.
We will not be doing a duplex. We'll be doing
Well-
single family, and these all, as we said in our RFP, it's conducive to the neighborhood, which are all currently single-family homes.
All right. I just feel it would accommodate more need if it was a duplex rather than a single-family home. And since there is a number of duplexes, they may not be immediate abutters, but they're abutters to abutters. That conservation land is in the back there. Although most of those lots across from the playground, for example, going up towards Bridge Street,
Yep.
there's several duplexes in among those. And I don't know how they were built there, because they were built quite a while ago. They've been around a long time. And they're relatively small, but they were all duplexes. I think there was 5 or 6 of them along the street that were built there, probably. What?
They're all pre-existing non-conforming now.
Okay, yeah.
So, again, a public meeting, if there's any questions you want me to bring to the trust meeting, or you want to wait till we come back to you, it's,
Turner, could I just offer a couple of notes?
Yep.
One point I wanted to raise, because the point was asked not that long ago by Bill, actually, and the question was about how many properties the town of Danvers actually owns. And what I would like the board to know is that that's a project that's ongoing. The short answer is there are close to 160 unique parcels of property in Danvers that are owned by the town. That ranges from the building we're sitting in the high school and the library, which are obvious town-owned, to little DOT splinters that we
To the triangle on Nickel
to the
Street?
triangle on Nickel Street and everything in between. So what staff is doing, this is a combination between Aaron's department, the assessing department, the engineering department, is to try to systematically organize those so we can see, these are the well-known large properties with, Endicott Park or the library or the town hall. At the other end of the spectrum are these little splinters that are virtually valueless. And then in between, we're gonna find properties like this that are buildable lots that the town acquired at some point in the past, which may be on the open space plan, which may be something that the Affordable Housing Trust is looking at. There aren't that many. I mean, I think we're less than 10 out of the 160 would be in this category. But that's a project that's ongoing, and at some point, we'll want to come back and make that presentation to the board. And then second is, as Gardner had indicated and what Susan references in this letter, there's some funding that disappears at the end of the fiscal year. And, mechanically, the money it has to be used on a qualifying project, and this would be a qualifying project if the trust were to buy the property from the town for a sum. The money can't be transferred to the housing trust. There's no mechanism where the money could go to the housing trust to save for some other point in time. So there's a time-sensitive nature to using these funds, which is why, as Gardner indicated, the trust is working kind of in parallel, but based on the feedback last time, I had asked that this memo get prepared and distributed so the board would be aware of what's going on and have a full month to think about what's happening and before the trust comes back in June at the first or the second or both of the meetings to talk about what they'd like to try to accomplish. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate you staying.
Aaron, in your files, you may find an open space plan, committee plan. This project you're undertaking about looking at identifying all the public spaces, I was on a committee with Pat Frazier and Karen Nelson when she first came to town, Donnie Sargent, who was a prominent business person, and Dot Pickett, who was a teacher. And we took the appraisal maps and we went every map by map, piece by piece, all over the town. The figures that Steve is referring to are pretty accurate, but that may already exist somewhere.
I've got a stack, if Steve saw my desk in my office,
Yeah.
I've got a stack, all the open space plans are on my table.
Yeah.
About this tall, so we're in the process of looking through all of that and seeing what we can find in there.
I just know that the town explored them in depth when they did the parking lot down on Park Street, because they took 3 parcels of land and then they offered the owners of the property, they were looking for parcels to offer them, and at that point in time, there were a couple of parcels that were offered those people where they moved their house down to the end of Chase Street. What?
The one behind the atrium building?
Yes. Because that was about 5 parcels altogether, and they took them, some of them by eminent domain, and then put them all together so they could make the parking lot to go along with the atrium.
Next update is for Bill. There was a question about the shrubbery out on the town hall lawn. And if you come by on Saturday,
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron.
Hi, Aaron.
Travis Reardon, our he's our supervisor of forestry and grounds. He has developed a pretty impressive planting plan for the front lawn. So if you want to come down on Saturday and watch, the forestry and grounds division will be busy remaking the front lawn for town hall well in advance of Memorial Day, and it's going to be pretty impressive when they're done. So
They get the shrubs out of there already, next
Not
to the
yet.
monument?
no, but they did say they'd like to see you do it in 10 minutes. You'd mentioned in a previous meeting you could get them out in 10 minutes.
didn't say that.
And Chuck Farrell said he'd like to see that. So they'd welcome your help.
You
on
want
Saturday.
some nice ruts in the lawn?
Well, 10 backhoes, 10 minutes.
I will, if they are looking for any topsoil or compost, I'm more than happy to donate whatever they need for that project. And we've got a lot of it screened out at the farm right now, so if they need some of that, we can load them up.
I think a number of forestry and ground supervisors have had the idea that they could do some pretty nice improvements in that lawn. So now, thank you, Bill. You've put that ball in motion, and it's going to happen this Saturday. So.
Bill's gonna be down there to
Yeah, he's
help
gonna
work,
lawn
right?
chair.
I hope so.
Oh, he'll supervise.
He better at least run the food table to help these people.
One of the articles we have for town meeting is the supplemental appropriation for the Canal Street project. We had mentioned during the warrant review process that we would be opening bids in advance of town meeting. We did open those bids just a couple days ago, so we haven't qualified the low bidder yet, but I am pleased to report that although the bids are higher this year, we should be able to complete that project within that additional appropriation with some money coming back. So more expensive than it was a year ago, but we had requested $475,000 be made available, and it does not look like we'll need to use all of that. So that's it's good going into town meeting knowing that we have bids in hand for that project. And then similarly, we'll have a bid opening on May 16th for the Highland Roof project. So we won't be able to award any bids until after town meeting, or expend any of those dollars until July 1st, but we should, by the time town meeting happens, have firm bids in hand for both of those projects, which are in separate warrant articles at town meeting. Just a quick update, one that I'm kind of pleased to report. We've had a number of employees go through professional development programs. One of the ones we've put a number of people through is it's a partnership between the MMA and Suffolk University. It's a leadership in local government program. We've been hounding them for a couple years because we want to host that program, and so in the fall of 2020, we'll be hosting that year-long program at the police station in the training room. Which gets us a couple things. One, it's going to be a free seat in the class, which is nice.
It's going to be
Free seat.
So they usually do 25 to 30 students in these classes from all over the Commonwealth. Joe's had a couple of employees go through the program. Jen Breaker's finishing the program. We'll have hopefully two going to Littleton this fall to participate in the program, and then a year from now we'll get to host a class, which will be great because we'll have a free seat in the class. And we'll also, we'll be making a hard push to get a number of Danvers employees into that class because it's in our backyard. And then sooner than that, I got a phone call earlier this week that the MMA, because we had expressed interest in hosting that class, will be hosting, there's an MMPA, which is the Personnel Administration Association for the state, and it's a joint program with UMass. It's a supervisory leadership class. We'll be hosting that this fall at the police station in that new training facility, which is really just a perfect facility for things like this. So we'll get a free seat in that class as well, and hopefully a couple of employees who are looking to grow as supervisors, within the organization will get to participate in that. So we bugged them long enough, they finally agreed to let us host some classes, which is very exciting.
It's a beautiful facility.
It's a great facility.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And then just looking ahead, Selectman Langley had asked during the warrant process that we think about revisiting the conversation we started earlier this year about kind of the long-term financial planning that we're doing. This is sort of separate from the annual financial summit we do in the fall. It gets a little more granular in the budget. And I had suggested at that meeting that I would, at this meeting or one of the May meetings, sort of give an overview of what we think would make sense to talk about at that meeting, and then look at perhaps the first meeting in June, June 4th as the night we could make that, provide that presentation. And essentially we'd be looking at our current financial policies, our reserve positions, updating on current liabilities, a little bit of peer benchmarking, some updated debt modeling from December, which is when we started looking at that, and then some budget scenarios are some of the areas we thought it would, probably try to invite the Finance Committee to see if they wanted to attend that meeting and just listen in, and we would put a PowerPoint together and try to get that out ahead of time, and to sort of circle back to the conversation we started. Something else we're working on that we'd like to get a draft to the board in advance of the June meeting, to see if the board would adopt it at one of the June meetings, is a financial policies guidebook. We have a number of freestanding policies. The board adopted some critical policies in 2016 related to fund balance, debt, free cash. And what we're finding, as we're getting ready to do our rating review with S&P later this year, the Department of Local Services has been funding towns and cities through their technical assistance program to put these policy guidebooks together. We have a couple of really good examples, so we don't feel the need to pursue state assistance for this, but essentially what we'd be doing is sort of putting in one succinct, easy-to-read document an overview of all of the different financial policies that we look at, from investment to debt to fund balance. It explains our approach to collective bargaining. It explains our approach to managing our liabilities. It explains our approach to budgeting. And it's a really important document for a couple reasons. One, it helps us to sort of codify and explain the way that we do business, but it's also a great document to hand to S&P, and they can, at a glance, get a view for how the town of Danvers manages finances. So we had a meeting this morning, Joe's staff, Rodney, retirement system, my office, to go through sort of the template and then start to plug in some of our specific information into that. And we're hoping to get that to the board more than, typically the agendas go out on a Friday. We'd like to try to get that to the board well in advance of those meetings, so you have a chance to review it and we can talk about that as well, with the idea that by the end of the fiscal year, we could adopt it and be able to have that for the rating agency as part of our presentation later this year. So June 4th is sort of the target we have for that presentation, and that was the general thought of what we would cover, and I'd be happy to incorporate any feedback or direction from the board as we continue to work on those materials.
Okay.
Okay?
Anything else?
I had one in my head that I hadn't written down, and I've lost it.
Well, we'll reserve the right to come back to you if you
Fair
think
enough.
of it. All right.
Motion to consider the consent calendar?
So moved.
Made and seconded? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, at this point, we'll have Selectmen's new business, previous new public business updates, closing comments, communications, anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't already. Mr. Clark, I'll start with you, sir.
Just have one comment. We'd like to wish all the mothers, including Miss Longley, Happy Mother's Day.
Selectman Mills, sir.
Nothing. Did Billy already mention the passing of Earl Clay at the?
That was the last meeting, yes.
At the last
Yeah.
meeting, okay. And, no, we have the senior men's dinner coming up a week from Monday, and I hope people will come. Bill and I will be there.
I'm going to one of
Nothing
those
else.
dinners.
Thank you.
Thank you for your Happy Mother's Day, although I was told I had to bring potato salad and corn, so I don't understand why I had to bring anything. But that's okay, as long as they serve me something good.
Potato
So,
salad
as
and
I
corn.
said, I've been doing a lot of traveling, and I'm glad I got to mention the blue signs, because it really bothered me. I had seen on 95 that we don't do anything to try to get some money out of those blue signs. But I also noticed, as we're working on, I forget what we call it, the Back Bay, where we're reducing it to 25 miles an hour, that program, and I was going to ask Dan to maybe bring it to the traffic advisory. You know, we've had some areas where people have complained about speeding and all, and I hate those big orange things that we wheel in and put up. I think it looks awful. I noticed in the Outer Banks, because they do a 25 mile, 35 mile, 45 mile, and how much people adhered. I mean, you did not go over that. And what they have is right under the sign, there's a little solar square. And I don't know what they go for. I should have taken a picture, I apologize. But it flashes at you, but it's constant, and you see people, as soon as they see it, boom, they come down. We have a couple of areas where we've had some problems trying to help people get, so I just thought it was something maybe we could look into.
So, and
it
the way
wasn't
we
ugly
left it,
looking.
we depend upon the police chief to come to us with recommendations for areas of 25.
Right.
He hasn't,
But
perhaps.
this sign underneath that tells you how fast you're going, I couldn't believe nobody went over that 25, 35, or 45, and it's one long strip. So just a suggestion, something,
Good.
again, as I do the rail trail, you know, we have the different flashing signs, and I was a little surprised at how inexpensive they are, even though they still cost money. But just a suggestion to
Good,
the
thank you.
traffic
Yep.
advisory. I thought they were really, and I'm sure David Lane has seen them, so
Okay, thank you.
that's it for me. 114 in North Andover has them?
Yeah.
So there you go.
Seen wrong.
Yeah.
I just have a couple of things. One is, I want to thank the board for covering while I was conducting some family business at the last meeting. I appreciate. I did watch the DCAT show, taping of it, which, by the way, I should plug DCAT. They have video on demand. You don't have to necessarily wait for them to replay a specific meeting. You can do video on demand on your computer and watch it at your leisure.
Everything's
anytime.
YouTube.
Yeah.
The YouTube.
Yeah, it does. They
yeah.
put it on YouTube, but I go through their video on demand, yeah. Yep. And just to remind people, you should see in the next week or so, Family Festival booklets are being mailed to every, program books are being mailed to every resident in town. And I should say, everybody who's on the residence list that the town maintains through the state will be getting those. Family Festival kicks off on the 14th, Friday the 14th, with the Big Pig Out barbecue at Endicott Park, and goes through all the way through to July 4th, as we usually do, with our Horribles Parade and the reading of the Declaration of Independence. So please look for your booklet. There are ticketed events. The Big Pig Barbecue is a ticketed event, and there's a DFF kickoff at Danvers Port. That's also a ticketed event. Look for those in details. You can always go on familyfestival.com. You can go on our web app. We have a app for Family Festival. You can call Town Hall. It continues to maintain a hotline during the Family Festival in case there's questions about whether an event's been rained out or not. And we look forward to a lot of fun and spirited events this year. So,
Jared, may I make before you, when you're done?
yep.
I forgot to say that I thought that the election, although it was not a great turnout, the town clerk and his staff did a great job, and these new machines are something that we have. I was able to push a button on my iPhone, and at 8:20, had the complete election results for the whole town. I think that's really kind of amazing, and the traffic management, not that there was a lot of traffic, but it was beautifully managed down by a central voting place. Thank you, Joe. Great job.
Mr. Clerk, do you want to offer any thoughts about the election? I'd certainly welcome them.
Just briefly, first of all, I want to thank the departments that help us conduct an election. Department of Public Works couldn't do it without them. Police Department does a great job, and the gracious hosts at the school department that allow us anything that we need, basically, to have a great election turnout. And all I can say is the equipment performed as advertised, and we're very pleased with it.
Thank you. And I was pleased, those of you who did vote got the opportunity to pick up a couple of reusable shopping bags donated by, was that East Boston?
East Boston Savings
East
Bank.
Boston Savings Bank. As a reminder, there was students working on their community service hours, and as a reminder that I'm going to call them the T-shirt bags. Plastic bags are going out of favor as of July 1st. June 1st. And so those bags are also available all around. I know there are other places you can pick them up, but want to thank the bank for their kind donation.
So there were a number of the bags given out at the Zero Waste Day, and credit to Selectman Bennett as well for really coordinating that.
Yeah.
The bank stepped up, but Dan coordinated that for us, connected us with the bank, and we had volunteers throughout the day to distribute those bags at the polling place, which was nice, because it also gave staff and volunteers an opportunity to remind people that the ban was coming. Even if they didn't need a bag, they heard that June 1st was the date. So I think we were able to reach a lot of people at both events and remind them of the change.
I know, I think you had more people at that weekend event than you did vote.
No, it was about the same, 900.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I know the cop had to move down the other entrance because the traffic was all the way past the tennis courts to get in.
It's become very popular.
So they rerouted
event.
it, yeah. It's a great thing.
Thank you. Anything else before I leave with Selectman Bennett? Selectman Bennett, sir.
You pass those down, thank you. So first of all, thank you to all the voters, or those voters that did come out on Tuesday. It was a beautiful day. Sorry more of you didn't take the advantage, but on behalf of myself and David, thank you for your faith in re-electing us. Blanks did not beat us. That was the goal. On next Wednesday, the 15th, the Light the Night Purple, a community walk gathering support and awareness of the opiate and other substance use in our community, will be held at the Library Pavilion at 6:30. It's a quick 1-mile walk to bring awareness and erase the stigma associated with this disease. And the high school a cappella group will be at various locations during the walk to serenade us. So it'll be nice. And then afterwards, back at the pavilion, there'll be a little program. So come down to the Library Pavilion, 6:30 next Wednesday. If you want a purple ribbon, let me know. We have more.
I like my purple.
And my next thing is to thank the veterans for their service to our country and protecting us. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passed. Thank you very much. Stay safe, Danvers.
Good night, David. Good night.